Well, good is it afternoon, morning, late morning, everybody. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank CSID and the conference host, the Center for Christian-Muslim Understanding here at Georgetown University. Is that better? Okay. This paper is essentially part of a book project I'm working on ethno-religious nationalism in Malaysia. The project started when I was based at Georgetown a few years ago. Initially, it was just focused on Malaysia's political trajectory, looking closely at the breakthrough election in 2018, when a government that had been in power for 61 years was overturned via the ballot box. And a new opposition coalition was elected to office, to federal government. However, I was here during the Trump administration, and what I noticed was the marked similarity between Malaysian politics and US politics during the Trump administration. In particular, the ethno-religious nationalism emanating from the Trump administration. Similarities between that and the governments, the past government in Malaysia and current government in Malaysia. So, many of the presentations focus on Arab states. Well, mine focuses on a Muslim majority state in Southeast Asia. And I believe there's one or two other presentations that does that. Well, I guess it makes sense because there are more Muslims in the non-Arab world than there are in non-Arab world than there are in the Arab world. Okay, so in my presentation as well, I have referred to Islamists in a shorthand manner. What I'm referring to are hardline Islamists. Okay. So there is a deepening global democratic recession that has persisted for about 2 decades. And the manifestation of this democratic recession includes the resurgence of authoritarian ethno-religious nationalism. And it's sweeping across the world, not just in the Muslim world. And because I've only got 10 minutes rather than the original 15, I will skip through many of the slides. Now, the ascendancy of ethno-religious nationalism is somewhat paradoxical. In view of the decline in religiosity, according to many studies, particularly in this century, or late 20th, early 21st century, yet there has been this ascendancy of religious, ethno-religious nationalism. So that's a bit of a paradox. And some academics and scholars have written about this paradox, and there have been interesting studies done on that, one in particular by Ronald Inglehart and a few polling agencies. And I think the latest book by Farid Zakaria that had just come out also looks at this paradox. Now, ethno-religious nationalists have become dominant actors across various political systems, and hence the comparative approach is an insightful one to study this phenomenon. So in my study, I look at transitional and fledgling democracies in Southeast Asia, that is Malaysia and Indonesia. And I might add here, Indonesia is considered arguably the most democratic Muslim majority country in the world, located in Southeast Asia. We have military-dominated Buddhist ethnocracies such as Myanmar or Burma, abandoned secular democratic states governed by partly free authoritarian religious nationalist governments in India and Turkey, settler colonial ethnocracies such as Israel, a backsliding settler colonial democracy, and I've included the United States in that category of being a settler colonial democracy, and Australia as well in my case study. Established liberal democracies such as the European Union and electoral post-communist autocracies such as Putin's Russia and Hungary under Orban. Now, ethno-nationalism, religious nationalism, departs from civic nationalism in that ethno-religious nationalism rejects, civic nationalism rejects vertical forms of ethnic hierarchy in favor of horizontal forms of citizenship rights, sometimes referred to as democratic citizenship, and that is consistent with the multicultural or multiracial democracy ideal. Now, we find particularly in places such as in Europe, conservative political parties have gravitated further to the right, doing deals with far-right political parties and movements. And Brexit is an example of that. The EU, in the EU, we find many far-right anti-immigration parties that have made gains, electoral gains, and many of these, particularly far-right parties, are very much inspired by the great replacement conspiracy theory, which I'm sure most of us have heard about, fixation on stopping limiting the migration of non-Europeans to their countries. And Orban, Hungary's Orban is a clear example of this. Now in India, if we move to Asia, we find the rise of Hindutva majoritarian supremacy from a state that was envisioned by the founders and framers as a secular democracy. In Myanmar, we find Buddhist hegemony supported paradoxically by Democrats and reformers. And Aung San Suu Kyi has been heavily criticized for not caring too much about the marginalization of the Rohingya community. So, I mean, this highlights that even Democrats and Nobel Peace Prize winners have ignored the human rights of minority communities. I've also written in my paper how the way by which race trumps class in many of these ethno-religious nationalist movements. And I've got 2 minutes to work on my central case study, and that is Malaysia, a country that is going through an unstable political transition since 2018, when this governing, the party that had been in government for 6 decades was overturned via the ballot box. However, the government that was elected to office was overturned via an insider coup, a bloodless insider coup by ethno-religious nationalists unhappy with the reform, the political, social, and economic reform agenda of these ethno-religious nationalists, in particular the Ketuanan Melayu doctrine that was promoted by this government. Now, so the Pakatan government collapsed in 2020. It was then re-elected in 2022. So it's now in power led by Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, who I believe is a fellow at Georgetown University still. But what I've been concerned about is the way by which this government, this second Pakatan government, has reneged on many of its promised political, social, economic reforms, has capitulated to the demands of ethno-nationalists and even adopted many policies that are quite authoritarian in the appeasement of ethno-nationalists. And I've given many examples of this backsliding of this ostensibly reformist government. And we find that the politicization of Islam by this government is quite similar to that of previous ethno-nationalists. Now, I'll just end off by noting the importance of coalition building, because what we have, these two reformist governments, basically are in coalition with ethno-nationalist parties. And that has in many ways derailed and destabilized the political, economic, and social reform agenda. So in other words, careful, these reformist governments need to be very careful with regard to their coalition partners. And so we have a government that is vulnerable, that is backtracked on its reform agenda. In terms of course correction, the jury is still out whether they will relook and make changes, because basically, despite the capitulation, this reformist, ostensibly reformist government has not pleased ethno-nationalists, neither has it pleased its coalition support, its reformist supporters that put it in, elected it to office. And there's even speculation of another coup, insider coup in the making. So it's a very, how would you say, tumultuous political environment in Malaysia at the moment. And I'll end off there. Sorry for the few minutes that I've extended into. Thank you.
Wish we had more time. That was very good.